All right, everybody tuning in here. Looks like everybody's got Friday on their mind here, unless I'm looking at the wrong view. Yeah, it's like me and you, Mr. Lobby.
Hi, sir.
How you doing today?
Doing good.
Good. And this is good too. It's a Friday, so everybody can tune into the recordings that doesn't make it to the live session. And everybody's running out the family reunion, including myself. So be a good day to just get through the content. All right. Guys, I'm just pulling up our PowerPoint here. If you hang with me 1 second. Elements number 9, contract to closing. Who's ready for some contracts? Picking up some stuff from some contracts. Oh yeah. Let's make some money. This is the money session. All right, I want to check in, just make sure you guys can see the PowerPoint screen. Give me some kind of signal, some kind of unmute. Yep, got it. We're in. Elizabeth might not be somewhere where she can check in. All right, guys, we're going to get right into the material. Today is Elements 9, contract to close. Find my cursor here. All right, so today we're pulling together a whole bunch of stuff on running your business, negotiating contracts, transaction management, vendor management, compliance risk management. All of that to me says systems. And we're going to talk about a lot of systems today. How personally, I'll be able to throw in personal experience on how I've run a real estate business, selling an average of 100 properties a year for 20 years without a big team, selling 65 to 75 homes a year past 3 years as a solo agent. And a lot of this requires systems. So where are we going?
You left the best for last.
Uh-oh, what's that?
The tricks, the ins and outs.
The ins and outs. Yes, that's the negotiate contracts part. You bet. Give you a couple of little tips and tricks on that. So this is the first thing I'm going to tell you, where build buyer and seller timelines. I'm going to show you guys some of the things that we do and how to create the perfect process. Here's what I want you to think about before I show you this stuff. And I'm going to show you real world examples, how we set up systems and how I've actually coached dozens of teams in KW that had me come out. They hired, they flew me, they bought me for the weekend, came in and just automated their whole business. These are big teams throughout KW, and we would take the entire weekend and or it's a 3-day process of documenting their systems, putting all their systems into a system, and then what that looks like. And here's what you need to think about it. We're going to pull it back to the simple first. You want to keep everything simple so you can do it. And the simple thing is, if you drew a timeline, and those timelines are dependent upon what's happening. So from the time I meet with a buyer until they write a contract, that's a timeline. And I have certain things I need to do to stay in touch. We're sending them properties. They start getting discouraged if they can't find a house within 3 months. So the message starts changing that it's been 3 months since we've been looking, don't give up. You got from the time I list a house until it goes under contract. That sign in the yard, is the lockbox on, is the MLS complete, are the pictures uploaded, are the virtual tours on? All this stuff has to happen. And then once everything's running, then it's like checking in every week or two with the seller that there's a spot in the system, a trigger that pops up like in a smart plan, is the way I want you to think about it, that says, hey, it's time to call your seller. It's been a week. So right now it makes me pause for a second, go look, see what kind of traffic we've had in the last week. If I've been super busy and I didn't pay attention to it, like what if they hadn't had any showings in 5 days? They would be feeling pretty discouraged knowing that the market's like crazy hot. So I need that trigger to pop up. Today on contract to close, we're looking at contract for a seller until close and contract for a buyer until close. And let me layer in front of that, this whole negotiating the contract and working the deal back and forth. Those aren't so much systems, but there's triggers in there that are triggering when we should have the inspections back, when we should have the appraisal back. Inspections, when they come back, we'll talk about tips and tricks on negotiating those as well, getting that deal done. But this is most of today is more about managing the transaction throughout that and when you negotiate deals. So this is a sample of what setting up a system looks like. If you were just to draw a timeline from the time your buyer writes an offer and it gets accepted until it closes, what's everything that has to happen to make it a crazy, awesome experience? And I don't care how much real estate you've sold, there are checklists in your office. Your whole checklist that you have for file compliance has most of your stuff in there to put in there. Do we have these documents? And what you want to do is create more of the experience. So from the time the contract's accepted, what has to happen? Well, you know there's a closing date, so you need to set that. You know that there's an inspection period, so you need to set a trigger there in your calendar to tell you when that's coming up. Did they get a warranty plan? Did they ask for concessions or any extra inspections? Or in your case, there's attorney involved. When does everything go to the attorney? Do you have check-in points with the attorney to help you stay on top of what's going on versus just seeing if they get their job done or not? So there's a whole, whatever your perfect process is, that when you think about what your client is experiencing on the other side, do they know what's going on? And if there's any point where you feel like they don't know what's going on, or maybe your next 4, 5, 6 transactions, they're calling you wondering what's up, that's a trigger to add a point back into your system that you're going to start notifying them before that time so that they know everything's happening and you can avoid the phone call. Because see, what happens is when those phone calls come in, little fires are happening and you have to respond and take care of fires all the time. It means you're not systematizing everything that could be systematized to prevent the fire from showing up in the first place. And if you're putting out too many fires, you can feel like you're always running 1,000 miles an hour. Now, the systems don't eliminate fires. What they do is they take the stuff that can be eliminated, or we see this thing show up all the time. It's like, what? My earnest money was canceled or check was cashed. I didn't have the money in the bank. If you don't have a trigger in there somewhere that says, when you find a house and you write an offer, your earnest money check will be cashed at the time of acceptance of the offer. Just plug that in. That can be an automatic email that goes out. Congratulations on your offer. Now, keep in mind that your earnest money check is being cashed at the title company. It'll be held for you until closing. However you guys do your earnest money there. Whatever that situation is, those are the things that you can automate a little bit and plug in. Now, it has to be in a smart plan world that you are starting that plan every single time on the day the offer is accepted. Because one day after the offer is accepted is when that email goes out to tell them the earnest money check's being checked or cashed. At day 0, actually, the day you start the plan, an email goes out. Congratulations, your offer's been accepted. But now if you're not starting these plans until a couple of days later here and there, that's not a system. That again is just flying by the seat of your pants willy-nilly. So in this particular case, what we do on the screen, you'll see step 1. Don't I just love notebooks? I just love handwriting things in notebooks. Keep it simple. Start writing down everything that you do when you're working with buyers, when you're working with sellers, when you list a house, when you get a contract. Just start keeping a tally list of every little step that you do, because you're going to be able to take those steps at some point and decide that somebody else might be able to do some of these steps for you, and you can assign them to an assistant or whatever. But when you're an individual agent, you're doing all the steps. And in fact, what you're doing when you're doing all the steps, that's actually better, because now you get to streamline and automate as much as you can through the smart plans and automated emails and reminders, so that when you do get big enough, you're still efficient to sell more houses because you're systematizing. And if you can sell 2 or 3 extra houses a month before you have to hire an assistant, then you're able to sock away more money to pay for the salary So the salary is not a burden. It's automatic. You're already bringing in enough business because you've systematized your business. So I went out there in the real world and I did it for you. I know for a fact you can sell 60 properties a year with no assistant and have a life. I did it with these systems. And the systems aren't necessarily my system. It's just a document of everything that happens. And I triggered and I set it up in a smart plan. So that all those things happen on one day after the contract's accepted, 7 days later, 14 days later. Some things are 1, 2, and 3, and 4 days later. There's certain things that have to be done and in check. Like in 2 days later is the inspection period set up because it might be expiring in 5 days. So we need to make sure that that inspection got set up. And think of it this way too. What if you just had 5 buyers write contracts in 1 day? Could you handle that the way you're doing your business today? Or could you have 5 contact records in command and you start 5 smart plans that say contract accepted? They all started on day or today, right? If you had 5 contracts accepted today, it's going to be a pretty good week, right? You had 5 contracts accepted today, you start 5 smart plans, and there's only like 6 things that have to be done the first day of contracts accepted. So now I have 18 things to do, right? But I've got 5 contracts. Oh, I said that wrong. If there's 6 things to do, you got 30 things to do on those 5 contracts to make sure they get done. But once I do those 30 things, there's still another 150, 60, 70 things that need to happen behind that, but they get spread out over time. So that would still be a busy day, believe me. I mean, you're going to have an hour or two in just organizing the contract. So if you have 5 contracts, you're working 10 hours that day. But if you hit those start buttons, it tells you exactly what needs to be done today. And that's about all you're going to get done today is handle those contracts. If you got 3 listings, if a seller calls you up and got 3 or 5 properties I want to put on the market today, I want to get rid of my rental properties. I mean, what would your normal life look like for the next week and a half if you got 5 listings set on your desk today and I gave them to you and I said, hey, these need to be on the market today. Can you handle it? Could you get the pictures on there in 1 day? 5 properties. Could you get all the pictures on there in 1 day? Could you get them on MLS in 1 day? Could you get all the stuff done, measured, all the details, everything done, seller's disclosure on all those properties, all in 1 day? And with a system, you can do that. So what you're seeing on your screen, this is not in your book, but this is on the, and I'll pause out if you have a question. And this is in the resource library that we have for you on the Google Drive. But let me pause out and just make sure there's not a question over some of this.
So do you have this systemized manually or via a smart plan?
There is no way I would try to do it manually. No way at all.
So
and I'll tell you, yeah, go ahead.
So what are these pictures that I'm seeing on the screen then?
Well, you're going to see it here in a second. I'm going to walk you through the process.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And just to keep that in perspective so I don't lose you, manually is called a checklist. Okay.
Okay.
Checklists, the reason why checklists don't work, and I've never really seen them work, is it once you start getting big business, you'll realize checklists are horrible. If you have 1 file on your desk, checklist is manageable. But again, you are always in reactive mode with a checklist, because just imagine if I had 5 files and 5 listings and I had my checklist, I have to open the file to look at the checklist to see what's supposed to be done next, right? And then I have to open the next file and go through the checklist, and I can do those things. But once things get crazy busy and the files are still sitting there on my desk, it's like, oh, I got to go check on those files, see what's next. It's like, oh, that was supposed to be done yesterday. Now you're playing catch up and you're either working ahead or you're falling behind and you're playing catch up. So paper checklists don't work because you have to open the file to see what's there. But if you take that checklist, which you're going to experience right here, we're going to walk through it, take that checklist and electronify it and put timestamps on it, because this is my standard. And where I usually get a little pushback from real estate agents is, like for buyers, for example, from the time we start working with a buyer until they find a property. Well, some buyers have to look at more houses than others, and some do this and some do that. I'm going to tell you right now, there's no CEO, no Fortune 500 company anywhere in the world that just has random, cannot control how long a transaction is going to take. Every one of them put everybody into their experience, their perfect process. So like with a buyer going to show them houses, yes, sometimes I might show somebody 10 houses, but they're driving by the properties first, or I'm not going out to show them the property. They're coming in for a consultation. They're signing the buyer agency. They know that they're going to drive by the properties before the day they hit the market. I'm going to get them to them. They know that if they like it, they're going to call me and text me the address, and we'll see if it's available. Then we'll go look at that property. And if I sent them 5 properties in one day, they will only check in with maybe 2 of them. They won't want to see 3 of them based on location, area. Somebody just told me the other day, it's like, yeah, it's exactly like you said. I took them out and showed them 7 houses, and they didn't even want to see 3 of them. They knew right pulling up front. They were like, nah, let's just pass this one. Well, we can't just pass it. We set up a showing and kick the person out of their house. We have to go lay our card inside and give feedback on the showing because it's set up and the seller's already left. So I wouldn't cancel that, but I wouldn't have shown that one because they wouldn't have ever made it on the list. So here's what this looks like. In step 1, you see this handwritten list. That's just where I was documenting everything. Everything I did. I wanted to document every stinking thing that I was doing. Even the stuff that I did naturally, I needed to write it down because at some point I'm not going to be an individual agent. I'm going to have somebody else on my team, and I need to be able to see the stuff that I just kind of do naturally, and I just do it because it's easy and I've done it. But I need that on paper as well so I can figure out where it goes in the system, and eventually that may be something that somebody else does for me. So if it's not documented, nobody's going to know if it's getting done. And you can't be the one that's always got to be there. So here we just documented, wrote down everything we did. When a call comes in, what do? We grab the yellow sheet or the blue sheet, right? Once we fill that in, we input them in the database. Once we do that, we start them on the appropriate plan, right? So those steps are in there. Step 2, what we did was we took every one of those lines in that notebook piece of paper, and we put each item on its own sticky note. This sounds crazy, but it is the coolest, most easy way to create the most ultimate systems ever. And what happens here is you write every item on a sticky note and just like stack them up. Just take one sticky note for every single item. Then in step 3 and the next picture, those 2 pictures there, when you look at those lines, you can see those little lines of sticky notes. So that, let's just say that top one underneath step 3. That is our new listing to contract plan. And the next line down is our new buyer until they write a contract plan. The next one down is contract to close. You'll see the one that looks like at the back of me there. One of those is from the time we get a contract accepted until it closes. The next one is from the time our seller gets a contract on their house until it closes. Everything's documented and systematized. And all we did was go back through the sticky notes and go, all right, deliver booklets. What's this for? This is for the listing process. So we'll stick that up on the line. Where do we deliver brochures and booklets to the property? Well, within the first 3 days, right? So we got to list the house, get the pictures, create the brochures, get them back out to the property and on the counters before too many more showings go through. And again, this sounds crazy in today's market. Well, they're selling so fast. Yeah. But if that booklet's there, it's got more for people to pick up and take home. We could round up more backup offers. We could round up more multiple offers because more people are thinking about it. So we have every single thing that we do built into the system, and every property gets a property brochure. The real reality is that property brochure probably justifies our commission more to the seller than it will ever do anything for selling the property. When they see that brochure show up, they're like, man, that looks awesome. And it's just a sample flyer, but we put it in the plastic report slide cover, plastic covers, and we put their top 10 list in there, their top 10 favorite things about their house and all that stuff. So there's another one. In our listing, pre-listing to list time, there's going to be a trigger that says send them the utility sheet to fill out, send them the seller's disclosure, send them the top 10 list. So they're doing a little bit of homework until we are ready to go live. But typically ours run almost simultaneously because we list them and sell them at the same time. We might have a 2-step listing presentation where I go there, their house isn't ready for showings today, but it will be the next time I come over. They've got the seller's disclosure filled out, all that stuff. So it might only be a 24-hour period that's running. And then we stop that plan and start the new list to contract plan. So those plans, there's different plans for different sections. So from a time somebody lists the house until it sells is a process. If you have a pre-listing period, that would go in until they're ready to list. And that, if your time period can sometimes be a month, 3 months, 6 months, then that plan needs to probably be a year-long plan. If you went and met with them, showed them their numbers, and typically they don't list till 3 to 4, 5, 6 months later, you're just having check-in points to see if they're getting all their stuff done. So you give them all their stuff to fill out at the beginning, but then see, in a pre-listing packet, I would probably have every week, I would have something triggered to say, send them a list of everything that came on in the last week and went under contract in the last week. So I would be pushing them to go, holy crap, we got to get this stuff staged. We got to get our stuff done. We got your house on the market. We're missing buyers, right? So that would be part of our pre-listing to get them on the market faster, to put the sign in the yard and go. So when you see this, we went through the steps. We put the sticky notes in the order that everything happened. And if you go back to step 2, you can see some chicken scratch down in the bottom corner. Once we get the process set up and everything in its proper order, we start at the beginning and walk through and go, okay, when does this item happen? And the brochures is an easy one, or a really good example, because when we went through this with our team, one of the first years we were doing this, I was telling people at the listing appointment, you're going to have this really nice brochure on your house in 3 days on the counter. So that we might miss a couple showings in the first couple days. And this was in a much more balanced market, by the way. But we might miss a showing or two, but that booklet's going to be there in 3 days. Well, they would call me at day 5, day 6 going, hey, we've had 3 people come look at our house and it's not selling because we don't have that booklet on the counter. Because I built up the booklet and said it would be there in 3 days. Well, then I found out when we were going through this process, I said, okay, when does the booklets have to be delivered? I'm saying 3 days. That's what I'm telling sellers. And my assistant that was putting the booklets together goes, well, no, we don't always do 3 days. And I'm like, what do you mean we don't do 3 days? That's what I've been telling people every time I go to a listing appointment. Well, sometimes we're pretty slammed, Brad. I mean, sometimes we get that out there a week later and I'm like, oh, we can't do a week later. So we got to talk about it. And we both compromised on 5 days. And I just needed to know, and she needed to know, that we were both agreed on 5 days. And then I could say 5 days and she knew she had 5 days, right? And if she got it in 3, great, but 7 was no longer acceptable. I mean, this is Disneyland. You can't just have the ride shut down, and maybe they'll be back open a little bit later today, but we just haven't had time to get over there. We're super busy today. Now, every time a ride's down, Disney's losing money. So we just went through that process. And the second thing we put on that corner of that sticky note, so the day that it needs to happen, if it has a date attached to it, the second thing was who on the team is responsible for that. So obviously, if you're an individual agent, that's you. You could put lead agent and assistant. Remember we were talking yesterday or the other day about financials? Yeah, it was just on Wednesday about putting on the hat that you're getting paid $10 or $15 an hour doing admin work. So maybe you put admin on those tabs so that you can see what's an admin item that you're working on and what is lead generating money activity for you. Now, the coolest part down at the bottom, I know it's small and I don't have a good blow up of it, but I want you just to see that the sticky notes are on the wall. If you take that row of sticky notes and turn it on its side from the first item down to the last item in the sticky note row, that's what's in the first column there, is the action item. This particular one is the Korn Team Perfect Buyer Process. And I always call them the perfect process because it's every step that delivers great experience. So that has every item from the time we start working with a buyer until they find a house. There's every step that happens. The second column tells us what day or what time frame that happens in. And it's in order. So the first thing says 0 days. The second thing says 0 days. The third thing says 1 day later. The fourth thing says 4 days later, and so on, right? And so that goes until they find a house. Now, the rest of the columns are the names of everybody that was on our team at the time I grabbed this example. And so in the first one is Danielle, and that's our assistant. The second column is Sonia. That was my wife. She's kind of the admin of the whole team, just kind of oversees everything in the office. The third column, can you see how many X's are in that column, and guess whose column that might be? Does it look like there's any X's in that column at all? Can you see it? Is it too small? No. There's 0 X's. I don't know if my arrow shows up on here. Oh, I think there is actually something where I can annotate with a, let's see, that's eraser, maybe spotlight. This column right here, there's no X's in it. That's my column. And the reason why there's no X's in my column is because this is the buyer process. And this is when I had a team of 6 or 7 people, which mean I had 3 buyer's agents. So Brad should not be doing buyer stuff. He was doing listing stuff at that time, right? So we'll undo this now, make it clean again. And then the rest of the people on the team. So actually this column right here was our main buyer's agent. And you can see all those X's that are in her, I mean, almost everything that is in that buyer process is in her column. But yet towards the end, when we get a contract, the admin person's picking up some more stuff and taking some things off her plate, but the buyer's agent is still checking on everything. Does that make sense? So that's kind of any questions on any of that?
No, sounds great. I just want to just make sure that as I follow along, this is to complement visually what's happening with the smart plan and what's happening digitally. So every time something pops up digitally, you go back and you move the sticky to the next step.
Actually, you only use the sticky note to create the plan. So once I take this spreadsheet right here at the bottom, step number 4, all you have to do is go in and create a smart plan with all of these items. Okay. And that smart plan is going to be called the perfect buyer process. And the first item is, do we have the blue form completed? And that's a to-do item, and it happens on day 0. So I would create that in my smart plan. The next thing we do is we send them an email with the link to our lender to get pre-approved. So that's an email, and that happens 0 days after we start this plan. The third thing on here is a phone call, 48 hours, 2 days after we start working with them, and it's a call, and it pops up 2 days later in the smart plan, and it tells us that it's time to call and see if they've gotten their pre-approval yet. There's also a call in there on 3 days later, and in smart plans, you'll delay it 24 hours or whatever it might be, right? And if there's several action items in a row that happen on one day, it's no delay. It's just 0, 0, 0, 0, and it's either a call or a task or a letter or an email or a to-do. So that's where you just take this spreadsheet and turn it into that plan. Now, here's the best part. When I put my buyer in and I start the perfect buyer process, because they are now saying, yes, we signed the buyer agency and we're working with you. They're set up on MLS search. In fact, there's a in the smart plan, it says on day 0, is their MLS search set up? So that if I was meeting with them, they signed, they're ready to go. And then I ran to my daughter's birthday party, and I was heading right there, and I was on a time watch to get there, right? That when tomorrow rolls up and I go to my dashboard and it says you have items due, and I look and one of them says, is their MLS search set up? And it's like, oh crud, I didn't set that up. I ran away from that meeting and took off. That's where I say everything you do naturally gets put into this system. Then you'll find that you drop the ball on a lot of things. One thing that gets dropped a lot on listings, and maybe you haven't had a ton of them yet, picking up signs and lock boxes. That can end up costing you thousands of dollars by not going back 2 days after closing and getting your sign and lock box. And that is still today. So now I have just me. I've had me for 2019, me most of 2020. I added a part-time assistant that had worked for me in the past, so she knew our systems real well. She actually called me back and wanted to come back and work. So I picked her up about halfway through 2020. She did all of 2021. She is on me about those signs and lock boxes. She cannot check that off until I tell her I went and picked it up. And I'm the worst. I mean, it's just like, man, I'm nowhere close to there. And she'll 2 days later, did you get that sign and lock box? Ah, crap, I'll just go get it. So that's why the systems are there. And she's probably saved me a couple months of her salary by doing that. So yeah, that's what you want to do. So does that make more sense now that you take it from the spreadsheet and create the SMART plan?
Yes.
And
How often do you edit the plan? How often do you review it? Like with the Stevies
it's going to be a living, breathing machine for probably a year or so until you get your stuff down. The only time you really change it after that is if you were going to family reunion this weekend and you hear this incredible thing that you want to add, then you can just add it to your SMART plan and keep going. Now, what you have to know, though, is that whoever's already currently running on the plan isn't going to experience the new thing, most likely. I don't think it picks up where you added new stuff, but it doesn't matter, because if it's something new you added, who cares if the 3 people I'm working with now don't experience it? They wouldn't have anyway, right? Or you can just go in and manually add it if you want to make sure you add it. So there's a little bit of management on the backside, and the biggest part is setting the systems up. Most people cannot get past setting it up. But once you set it up, see, I'm not setting it up or doing these sticky notes for every client I'm working with. I'm doing it for the process. And once the SMART plan is created, I just put them in and hit go on the SMART plan. So you only create the campaign or the SMART plan one time, and then you'll tweak it over a year or so to make, because you're going to remember a ton of stuff you don't really have documented. And then what happens with that SMART plan is now I start getting busier because I'm running the SMART plans. I'm getting things done faster. I'm getting more efficient. My brain is clearing up. I'm getting more business. I'm getting more appointments, right? I'm lead generating better. I'm doing all this stuff. So I add a couple more sales and I get to where it's 2 sales extra every month. Then I start making a little extra money. I've got profit. I set that aside. Once I have enough profit in about 2-3 months that I could cover the salary of an assistant, right? I want a 3-month bank of, if I'm going to hire an assistant, I want to go 3 months. This is me personally, and this is what I coach to. Go 3 months without your assistant when you need an assistant. And if you can put the salary aside that you would have needed to pay them with, then you can hire the assistant. But if you put it away 1 month and then you need it the next month, aren't you glad you didn't hire an assistant? Because now you're stressing out about how you're going to pay them. Yes. And if I put 3 months aside and I'm about ready to put the 4th month, things are going good, they're consistent, and I'm growing, I'm not on the roller coaster ride, and it's consistent, then when I bring them on, the next month is covered by that month's salary, is covered by that month's business. I have a cushion of 3 to 4 months sitting aside if we have a dip or a change in the market and I didn't shift fast enough and all that other stuff. You got 3 months sitting there in a slush fund to make sure your salaries are covered if you have a downtime. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
Best business model ever. And it takes the stress off of trying to support another family and blah, blah, blah. And if you're stressed while you're on your own, you need to get these systems in place to where you feel the stress level lighten up. You don't hire somebody to come in and create these systems because they don't know what needs to be in the systems. They don't know who you are or what you've done. I'm probably the only person you could hire if you were going to hire somebody first to create your systems, because I understand them. But somebody coming in is not going to be able to create those systems for you. You're the one with the experience behind and knows what every step is. But that's a big mistake people make. They hire somebody to come in and get their database cleaned up. No, you need to clean up your database and then get the systems in place to handle more business, and then hire an assistant to manage the systems. The database is your bank. That is your ATM. That is the bank vault where the money is stored. Every name and address is a bundle of $5,000 cash, wads of cash, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, all right, let me see where we are on time. That was a great question, though. I'm glad you asked it. Okay, so building your timeline. There it is. Executing the contract, working with the lender, the home inspection, home insurance, home warranty, close. See how that just matches up with what I just showed you, real world? And then this is kind of what another plan looks like. I don't know how to make that go away. I don't know if that was showing up on your guys' screen. All right, so this is that buyer offer. This is a buyer's offer to close in 45 days. Hopefully you can see this one a little better. Unless you're on your phone, that's tough. But so the first thing on here is a to-do from the time a buyer's offer gets accepted. What we do is we start this so that we're closing in 45 days. It could be closing in 30 days. It could be closing in 60 days. So we're starting this plan to where the last item in the list ends on the 45 days from there, or the closing date. So we might backdate this a little bit if there might be like, let's just say it's closing in 30 days. Well, these first 15 days worth of things are going to be due right away. Does that make sense? Because we're going to backdate at 15 days because this is our 45-day plan. However, what I've also done is when you create a smart plan for this, you can copy that smart plan and then shrink up all the time frames. And you could have a 30-day closing, a 45-day closing, and a 60-day closing. I've had those plans in my database before. So I can
So how do you
go ahead?
So how do you go about doing that? Just removing the delays or adjusting the delays in between?
Yeah. So if it's a 30-day closing, actually, you won't see this whole plan here, but there's a big gap from about 7 days till about 20 days.
Mm-hmm.
So everything happens in the first week, and then a ton more stuff happens the week before closing, right? So all we do is shorten that gap in between, and then all those things get done. Yeah.
Got it. So you don't need to go up high, up low, just the gap in between, just adjust those days. Got it.
Yep. And you might move a couple items that happen now on day 0 versus day 1 or day 2, and it's spreading it out. So you have all the things I have to do on day 0. We only have 4 things to do. Give them print the letter for congratulations on your purchase and put that in the mail because that's going to show up 3 days later. But did we get the earnest money check? So the assistant is tracking that down. Lori is sending the copy of the contract to the title company on day 0. And Lori, who's my assistant, sends a copy to the loan officer if there's a loan officer involved. So, and then an email goes out on day 1 of what to expect next. So they're already getting an email that says, here's what's going to happen next. And then they get the letter in the mail. Congratulations, you got your offer accepted. So, I mean, you kind of think of how you're planning all this stuff out, but we didn't care about that. Put it on the sales board. See, putting it on the sales board isn't critical. That does not have to be done on day 0 when we got a ton of other stuff to do. However, we do want to eventually get it on the board. That could even be day 3 or day 4 for all I care. Because that's just for us to have the visual of what's coming up and when things are closing, things like that. Order inspection and send to the lender the contract. So we did do that up here. This is a to-do to check to make sure we've got the inspection set up and did the lender receive the contract. So it's a to-do, not sending it to them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then we also, like day 1, you talk about tweaking your plan. So we had buyers that were under contract like, hey, we just got another really cool property. We want to go check it out too, just in case this one doesn't work. It's accepted. So we had to add in here, take the MLS search off. Just discontinue the MLS search. They don't get to see any more properties anymore until we get through inspections, and then we can turn it back on. So if we got through inspections and they were canceling the contract, this plan would stop and they would go back over to the buyer to contract plan. And we'd restart that plan. Does that make sense? So the systems are running our entire business all the way through of everything that needs to be done. How many are getting more excited about this contract stuff now? Woo! All right, so build a seller timeline. When you get an offer, when's the inspections happen, the appraisal, the closing. Now here's something that's kind of funny too. I mean, I'll show you this contract. This is our seller to close in 45 days. So that's just our standard. We put everything at 45 days. Doesn't mean that we don't say 30 days or whatever, but our plan runs for a 45-day period. Seller, congratulations on the acceptance of your offer. Day 0, that goes in the mail. It's a letter. There's a to-do to get a copy. Same thing as before. Those copies of the contracts are going to different people. But you'll see on day 1, oh, and I forgot, I'm like talking with my cursor, and you guys probably aren't seeing things. So let's see right here, to do, Lori, add the co-op agent into our database so that we have their contact information in there. We're going to be talking to them a lot. So that happens on day 1, 1 day after that contract's accepted. Same with the board, that it gets up on the board. All right, look at this, to do, urgent. Is this a happy client? That's going to happen 2 days after the contract's accepted. And the reason why is because in 3 more days, an email's going out to say, put a review for us on Google. In 5 days, that email will automatically go. So anytime anything's automated, we have a trigger to check to make sure we want it to go. And then we can delete that manually if they're just the whiniest crybaby people ever. we're going to take that. I'm just going to delete that step off of the campaign, off of their contact record, and then we'll just go on to the next one. Congratulations, sellers. Yeah, this is so awesome. So
oh my God.
awesome. Yeah, and everything's in here. Upload the inspection notice. So within 15 days, has the inspection notice been received and is it uploaded? So all that stuff's just really, really cool. All right. Clean the screen up so we don't have this on here for next time. So you guys like this? Is pretty awesome, isn't it? And that's just a campaign. Now here's the thing, the warning I'll tell you is that once this plan starts, guess who's working for who? Am I the boss? Am I a self-employed person that can come in and work whenever I want? Or like I said the other day, do I work for Snoopy? And right now I'm the listing guy and I have stuff I have to do in here and it has to be done when the system says it needs to be done, or else our clients aren't going to have a great experience. So all of a sudden I'm an employee. And until I get to level 7, I am not the owner who can do whatever he wants, right? The other cool thing is if Lori's out for a week on vacation, sorry, Brad Korn's got to do Lori's work. Somebody's got to pick up the slack, right? Unless I want to hire a temp agency or do something like that, then I would just give them all of Lori's items. So
and
again,
not only that,
what's
like
that?
if somebody calls out sick or something, you know what that person is supposed to be doing that day. So anybody can just pick up where that other person left off.
And now that you're getting this so well, I mean, can you imagine a checklist that has everybody listed separately on the checklist and every single person on the team has to open up every single file to see what they're supposed to do?
Cannot. I was going crazy with just like three.
Yeah. Your admin person may be the one that's in charge of all these activities that goes into the task list and divvies them out to everyone for the day. And we do send that, like where we got internet leads that are being converted. So we have an internet conversion plan that we capture an internet lead. It gets put into the database. The smart plan starts and it's a call every day for 3 days in a row. So every day our buyer's agents are getting lists from us of people they have to call. And if we get to call 3 or 4, and at the end of that plan, after I think it's like 40 days or something, if they have not been stopped on that internet plan and converted over to a connected 8x8 plan, we're kind of going, hey, like we had 10 people that expired on the internet conversion plan. Are you calling people? I mean, you didn't get anybody on the phone. So, and they've made 5, 6, 7 attempts in that plan. So plot your communication points. This was the absolute biggest thing, which here's what's kind of cool about this. What I'm explaining to you is Ignite Elements 9. I did not write this. This is where I built my business from. So everything I'm sharing with you was going through Ignite, just like you're going through today. And these communication points, when you get everything up on the line, when you go contract to close, this is the biggest reveal. Contract to close for your buyers and your sellers. When you line everything up, just look at it and go, how many of these are phone calls where we actually talk to the client throughout this process? It is in nobody's system. What's happening is we're working and doing all this stuff behind the scenes to deliver great service. Nobody's telling the client when you have a smooth transaction that everything's good. I mean, we have check-in points. We call them at 14, day 14 after the contract's accepted. Actually, it's day 7. It says check in and see how they're doing. And almost every time we call, when we thought things were good and we're cranking and everything's on track, they're like, yeah, we were actually just curious. So is our house really sold? And it's like, what do you mean is it sold? You got the letter that said, congratulations, your house is sold. And they were like, we just hadn't heard anything for 5 days. So we didn't know for sure what was going on. And it's like, oh my God, the communication points need to be plugged back into everything you're doing. Everything you're doing. In fact, those first-time buyer until contract plans, we've got several calls in the front end to the lender, to the buyer, to say, did they get pre-approved yet? That's on day 3 to the lender, right? On day 2, it's like, did you get the email with the link to the, yeah, I just haven't done it yet. It's like, no, this market's moving too fast. You got to click on that today and fill out that online application. And then 3 days later, it pops up, says, call the lender, see if they did it. Call the lender. Nope, I don't have anything from them. You get on them because I already told them yesterday that if they didn't fill it out yesterday, that you were calling them and I was the one that told you to call them. right? So now we're having the same communication. Now my lender can't be soft, because most of them are like, well, I don't want to bug them. It's like, no, I already told them you were going to call and yell at them on day 3. So, and you don't really say, hey, on day 3, I'm going to have them call you and yell at you. You say, I'm going to tell that lender to call you now and get that information from you. So take his call when he calls, right? Or she calls or whatever. So all those communication points are checked in there. I was going to tell you too, back on when we were looking at inspection for a seller. So we do have a trigger that pops up and says, put the inspection expiration time on the calendar. We do this for buyers and sellers, but put it on our calendar so we know when we, and actually what my assistant does, it puts it 3 days before and says inspection period ends in 3 days. And she puts the one on there, also on there, that says inspection period's ended. But so that trigger comes up. Now, when I'm representing a seller, I'm not calling the buyer's agent saying, hey, your inspection period's about up, and encouraging them to go get an inspection. But I need to know when it expires, because if something's not going through, then they can't do anything. Once the inspection period's over, they can't cancel the contract on inspection items. So I might, the day of the expiration of the inspection period, email or call the co-op agent and just say, hey, is everything looking cool on your guys' end? Everything moving forward? Yep, they're moving forward. They're good to go. They're not doing any inspections. It's like, okay, good. If they don't say anything in inspections, I might say something like, well, we're just 2 weeks in, so I wanted to make sure everything's still on track. I can't give them any more hints than that, right? So you can just really follow the process and remember who you're representing on those things.
Got it.
And then plot your documents on your timeline too. So that's any other documents that you may need. So we have the closing, the title company, the address, the contact information. And see, we do most of our stuff with one particular title company, but I actually have 3 different letters and 3 different title companies, depending on who we're dealing with. Your attorney information. See, all that upon acceptance, maybe there's a little letter or an email that goes out. And I do some mail in with email. And the mail could be the same exact thing that goes out in email, right? So I might email something, and I'll mail something like the day before, like we did on the one thing, congratulations on your offer. So that went out and it's showing up in the mail 3 days later, but we sent that email the next day. It also said, congratulations, here's the next steps. But that letter might show up 2 days later. And what we found is spouses don't necessarily talk to each other. Somebody gets the email and the other one doesn't know what's going on. So if we sent an email and letter, we're covered usually, right?
Got it. I was wondering.
Yeah. So the more communication you do, and because it's automated, the letter, we just said, send the letter. So we sent it. The email went out automatically. We didn't even see it. So the stuff's rolling without us having to touch too much, right? Automate what you can, but be careful on your automation, because the more automated it is, the more mistakes you're going to have because you're too automated. So if it's something that could change from client to client, you need to have a trigger in there to check to make sure you've got your plan set up right. So best practices for managing the deal. Let's see what we got time frame here. And it's Friday too. We got 10 minutes before your weekend's about ready to start. All right, so best practices on looking at your timelines and answering the questions. Where is the deal at risk of falling apart? You need a check-in point there. What are the best practices to keep the deal alive? Well, as you put these checkpoints in, and as things are showing up as issues, you start adding those points back into your SMART plan, where we were talking about tweaking it a little bit and growing for the first year and making it better every single year. So what you're going to find is the more checkpoints you have, adding the co-op agent into the database and having a check-in point to call them at 2 weeks into the deal. Say, hey, just checking to see if everything's going good. How's everything going on the lender? When we're representing a seller, we have a check-in point to call the buyer's lender. I don't care if I'm supposed to or not supposed to. I'm calling the freaking buyer's lender, and I'm checking for my client to make sure that it looks good. And if they don't tell me anything, then that's fine. That they don't have to. But if they tell me stuff, then that's good to know. So we had one that the buyer was never even approved, and the agent was just the whole time, yeah, they're working on it. They're working on it. the lender hadn't even told the buyer's agent they weren't approved. We found out they were not approved before the buyer's agent knew they weren't approved. So we ditched that offer and got another offer in there before it was too late and got it sold. But the seller had a delay because all this popped up the day before closing, and they were working on it. We were doing it. We were about ready to do these extensions. Well, the lender just needs a little more time. I already knew from our call to the lender that they wouldn't tell us anything, and we knew they weren't approved. So we were like, I either need an approval letter today or we cannot sign this amendment to extend it. We're going to have to put it back on the market. Of course, we sold it right away. So there's just triggers and check marks in there for everything. Tasks and deadlines. What are those deadlines? And you'll know that when you're tracking out and doing the yellow. I'm telling you, the yellow sticky note thing is the most genius thing ever. I wish I could claim it, but I saw somebody do it once. I don't even know if they knew that how awesome it was, but it turned into one of the most awesome things we do. I can systematize anything and everything in our business. I'll give you another example of one of those sticky note ones, because this goes into all business. I had somebody just say, it was actually a lender friend of mine was calling and asking, I want to get some builder business. And I was like, it's all about the follow-up, and it's coming up to Parade of Homes, and you draw out a timeline, draw the dashes of the touches that you'd want to make. And so it's 10 touches. And then I want one to be a phone call. I want an email, letter, whatever. And then what would I send to that builder from Parade of Homes until I can get them picked up? So the message was leading up to, so you're super busy. Congratulations on your awards, blah, blah, blah. About 2 weeks in, it's like, do you feel like you're getting caught up on your stuff from Parade of Homes? Congratulations. 2 months later is, do you feel like things have slowed down? You wish you could have another Parade of Homes? Well, we can turn every day into a Parade of Homes for you, or every weekend with a better marketing plan. Because Parade of Homes is not a marketing plan. They get business twice a year. That's it. And then they go down to regular business. That generated 5 builder appointments where the builders called me saying, I want to know what those 10 things are you do to keep Parade of Homes traffic coming through all the time. So that's crazy, right? And it was just
insane.
Yeah. So that was just a thing that was going out, and it would trigger me. I'd call, leave a voicemail. Hey, it's Brad Korn over at the Korn team. Just checking in since the parade. How's things going? Click. They're getting the letter, they're getting the emails. It's just, I'm everywhere, right? And they were like, all right, I need to talk to this guy, see what's going on. So those are our follow-up plans. So you can manage other parties involved in the deal. I did not make this slide up. This is like what happens real world when you go to Ignite and you do what Ignite says. Co-broker relationships. I mean, this is, again, the bonus that we get is that now you could really impress them that you're on the transaction. The transaction closes smooth. You make sure they know that whenever you work with me, we're going to always have smooth deals like this. Everything's systematized. And they're like, man, that's just crazy. It's like, well, come on over. I'll show them to you. And then they come over to KW, they put you down as a sponsor, and now you got a downline, right? So you're just going through those deals, figuring out where things could slip apart, fall apart, all that. And then because of that, you're getting the repeat business. And when you create that Disney experience, you're going to get more referrals. And nowadays with the new app, holy smokes, it manages the whole transaction right there on their phone. Create vendor and utility lists. Crazy. Like in the follow-up, 10 years after they buy the house, from the time they close, next 10 years, we're sending things to them, especially in 3 years, 5 years, and 7 years. They're getting lists of people that we have affiliates that we built relationships with that we're sending referral business to on fixing your deck or fixing your windows or getting your roof checked out. And so we're just in front of them all the time. And then plan a closing gift. So having that trigger in there. So let's see, what am I showing you here? This is like one of our action item list. If I were to print out that dashboard for the day, it actually shows some of the to-dos here. One of them here was a buyer prospect, send the hot properties SOC, and that's for send out cards. So I have 3 or 4 templates in send out cards that this guy, Jake, has been getting properties from us for a while. He may or may not be approved yet. He hasn't written a contract yet. He's just on our buyer prospect plan. So we're probably sending him properties from MLS, and he hasn't really started to get active yet. We probably haven't even shown him a house yet. So one of those cards actually shows all the houses sold, and the guy's like frustrated. And it's like, hey, Jake, if you think you're missing some properties, you probably are. Let's get out and start driving by these properties, get that pre-approval done. And I just send them a send out card. So it's not a handwritten note because see, Jake got the handwritten note when he was on the 8x8 when I first met Jake, the very first time we connected with him. Unless he was an internet lead, he would have went right into the buyer prospect search. Because if he was an internet lead and I got him on the phone, I would have filled out the blue for buyer form, right here, handy, grabbed it. Jake gave me all of his information. I set up the MLS search. I started the buyer prospect form. He already knew from that phone call, you're going to get an email from me for the lender. Click that button, call him today, get him his stuff, and then it triggers. And it's like 3 days later, we call the lender. Hey, did Jake send in his stuff to you? So everything, mail market updates. So here's a Jeff Cooper is a seller that's been on the market for 27 days. This is a little commercial property in a rural area. So it's not going to be something that got 10 offers and anything like that. We just get inquiries on it, but it's just a little commercial piece of property. But I'm sending market updates to him to let him know what commercial properties have come on the market, what have gone off, and what he's finding in that market. Nobody's gotten any offers on any properties. So we're still good. It's been 27 days. He's not frustrated. In fact, he can go 6 months and be totally happy. But anyway, everything's in here. It's just pull expired and canceled for the ideal property. So Maxine has been on searches for a little while and she hasn't found anything yet. So this triggers us to go pull expireds. See what we're doing. Oh, got about 3 minutes. So Command transaction management. Again, in Command under opportunities, you got the contract. You can edit the different stages because a lot of the contract stuff is already in Command under the different stages. However, I personally just create a smart plan for everything. That way I can completely customize it. But I did want to show you in Command, there's a little handshake thing down here, and that's your opportunities. And there are stage names that have activities in them already, from escrow to inspections to appraisal. I didn't play around with that a whole lot because I already had mine created as a smart plan. So that's what we created with smart plans, but you really should check into this and see if this flows the way you like it to flow.
So
same with, yeah, go ahead.
I just came across that last week because I was testing out DocuSign. So I started doing the steps, and then I found out that I was able to customize the tasks, sort of like a timeline, like a Kanban board. So then it moves from one stage to the next. So I just didn't play around enough with it where I would realize I don't know if it allows for deadlines or not.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
if it did allow,
no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
If it did allow for deadlines, what would you think? What do you think would be best, that or smart plan?
I do not like having deadline. I'm not having deadlines. Okay, so there was an old thing in the past that was cascading. This is kind of like having a checklist again. It's like having an electronified paper checklist. So if I have to go into the stages and look to see what needs to be done because there's not a timeline associated to it, then my perfect process could take 3 months or it could take 1 month. So if I have to go in and see what needs to be done, I don't like that. I'm saying we're going to do everything this way, just like Disney would do it, just like Starbucks. Starbucks has their way. They do everything so they can get you in and out of there in about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, right? So nothing's just like, okay, let's see what coffee we got here and where to do that and go in and see what needs to be done. No, they've got a timeline that it's processing through. And that's what makes that experience awesome. So I would create the smart plan before I would use something that doesn't have timelines. And again, most of the creators of this stuff, I mean, even though I've made a lot of changes in Command, a lot of suggestions I put in there have been in there, and I didn't play with stages. If I did, I probably would have said, you need a timeline on every item there, and I need to know if it's happening 1 day after, 2 days after. I would have told them to do that, but I was already used a smart plan. So I'll have to look into it and see what that is. So same thing with consumer guide settings. I mean, you can go in and customize your buyer guides and your seller guides. And that, again, you can put in there how you operate. And now that you have your system lined out, you can have in there, here's how the process works. Once you write a contract, we will accept the earnest money. It will be cash, blah, 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 blah. You can go through, make sure some of those things are in your books. All right, so get down here to the survey and let me know what your ahas were from this, or what are you really excited about? Just click on the survey link. It'll open up a separate link. That way, when we close out, you got it open and you can do that. But what's some of your ahas or favorite things you got out of today? Uh-oh, she might have been pulled off to the side. All right, guys, if you have any questions at all, my email is cornteamkc@gmail.com. Send me your questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, my aha moment was like paper, like writing everything down, and then having that visual, and then from that visual creating the smart plan, because having that visual is going to prevent you from missing any steps, and it's going to help you visualize the entire process and then cross-reference back to back and see if it works. Try it out, and then once you trial and error, and now once you figure out, then that's it. You remove, like you said, remove the stickies and just focus on the smart plans. But that's just like, wow.
Yeah.
And going back to paper, what you suggested, having that master list in a notebook, you would not know how many people I missed going back now after I started writing them down.
Yeah,
I thought that I had gone through like the list going down, and I was like, oh my God, I missed this one. I missed this one. So yeah, paper. It's still, there's no way of replacing that.
Yeah. The other thing about writing it down is that when you're writing that name down, it's one more little memory plug that's solidifying on that person. So then when you look up their picture, you've written their name down. Now you've typed their name into command. You got to have multiple touches. Otherwise, they're just still a lost soul in the pile. Same thing with your task list. When you're putting all that stuff up there and you put that into your campaign, when you run your business from your campaign, not you, like I've done this for 30 years, I can do it all like without even thinking about it, but I have to check the items off on the checklist. And if I did something that wasn't on the checklist, oops, I need to add that piece in there. So that's why our checklists or our smart plans are so detailed now. And then the last thing I'll give you on this, think about this process being your annual meeting. This is your annual business planning day, where when they say what worked, what didn't work, we're going to all write down everything we do for 2 weeks. Everybody's documented everything they do. You're all going to bring your list in. We're going to transfer that. If you have a team, we're going to transfer that over to sticky notes, right? And then at our business planning meeting, when we talk about what worked, that doesn't work, well, let's go through this process. Let's put it all up. Boom, boom, boom. What are we missing? What can we do better, right? And what do we need to take out? And your team, whoever's on your team, it could be your lender, your title company, your inspector, right? They're part of your team, that you're going to add them in the process. And when you see everybody's names written down on those sticky notes, even if you're one individual agent right now, you've got admin versus buyer's agent, right? It just starts, you see that because you're writing it down and you're like, man, I probably could do a team at some point, So it also just puts into relation what part of the process you're doing. But again, that's our annual plan. And when everybody's a part of it, see, if you invited the title company, lender, inspector, and they saw your process and they see where they fit in there, they're walking out of there with a totally different perspective on your business. And when somebody says, hey, I'm thinking about selling, they know a ton of realtors. Who's going to come to mind? You, because it's like, oh my gosh, Elizabeth has got her stuff dialed in, right? And then when you do have team members, they get buy-in and they see where everybody fits in the puzzle and everybody's part of every single transaction. So when one of us drops the ball, and once we put it up there, if are we committed to this? Is everybody a part of this? Yes. We're good with this time frame. Yes. You get buy-in all the way through your systems. Where other than if you have this system and somebody joins your team, you just say, no, we just do it that way. Well, sometimes we can't get those booklets out there in 3 days. We're just super busy. They're not a part of it at all, and they don't see why it's important. So that's where the systems really come into play.
1 month of the year, normally do you recommend doing the annual meeting? Like November, October, or waiting until January? Or does it matter?
I probably wouldn't wait till January. ramping up and getting ready to go by January. That would be the very latest. But yeah, usually October, November. Yeah, right before the holidays hit. Then you got your plan ready to go in January when you come back from all those holiday distractions. Not that you quit working during that, but it's the least probably time. It's not really least work, it's just more time off, extra few days for Christmas, extra few days for Thanksgiving, extra few days for New Year's. You're just not working as hard. So yeah, that October, November is always good. And then January, you're rolling with them.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey.
This was I'm a brand new person right now, brand new agent.
All right. Well, I love hearing that you really, really liked it and got it too. I mean, you really did get it. So that's awesome. All right. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Have fun in Florida.
Oh, yeah, that I will.
All right.